Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Luv Bay family, we're rising out of the ashes together. Our topic on tonight is the human experience. We have with us our co-host, Carrie Hardy, and our guest for the evening is Jennifer Peterkin. Listeners, if you have questions or comments for our guest or co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. If you have resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, or local organizations, or your faith community, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Carrie, if you would greet our listeners on tonight.
Hi, my name is Carrie Hardy. I'm a writer, and I love bringing women's stories to the forefront, as well as other marginalized communities. And I love talking about hard subjects and just putting them forth in a way that, even though it's a hard topic, it's comfortable to listen to and talk to, and you just feel like you're in an environment where there's no judgment and it's a safe space. Because I know, especially now in 2022, almost 2023, bringing taboo subjects is coming more into the forefront. But I still feel like people don't really know how to address it properly or in a way that's sensitive to people who have actually been through stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's why I really love this show, because I feel like there's a really high level of empathy, and all the speakers know the correct way to go about talking about things and addressing things and being sensitive to different audiences and stuff like that. So yeah, if you have any questions for me, if you want to get in contact with me, my email is imagesattainable@gmail.com, spelled images, and then phonetically attainable. So it's just imagesattainable@gmail.com. And my Instagram is Carrie Hardy 23.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Jen, would you, I don't want to say introduce, but would you just say hello to our listeners?
Yeah. Hello, Luv Bay. This is a new thing for me, being in the guest section or the guest seat tonight. I'm super honored and humbled to have this opportunity and this platform to talk about my project, The Human Experience, and just so thankful to both Tia and Carrie for just their time and, again, the platform. So I have been and continue to be one of the co-hosts on Suffering in Silence, and I am a survivor of domestic violence. I was married to my abuser and was connected with Tia, probably a couple years ago now, maybe a year and a half ago now, in that mutual, having gone through that same experience together. So, I'm just really excited to continue to work with Tia on everything that she has planned, because she's a rock star. But I also have my own project going right now, which is called The Human Experience, and it's been such a passion project for the past couple of years. And it is in the main format is going to be a podcast, and that is launching in January.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So listeners, I want to share with you some resources, and then we are actually going to talk about Jen's project, The Human Experience. So first we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Their website is thehotline.org. Their phone number is 1-800-799-7233. We also have the Polaris Project, National Human Trafficking Hotline. Their number is 1-888-373-7888, or you can text the words Be Free, BEFREE. You can text the words Be Free to the number 233-733. Their website is polarisproject.org. And Polaris is POLARIS, polarisproject.org. And then we have the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, PCAR. Their website is pcar.org. So again, listeners, on tonight, our topic is the human experience. And many, many times you have heard the human experience as Jen has introduced herself or greeted you all as she is with us on the Friday evenings that she's, helping us out on a program. And tonight we are going to learn actually what the human experience is. So, Jen, can you start, just by, I know you told us a tiny bit, but just tell us more about the human experience.
Sure. So the human experience will be, like I said, its main format will be in podcast. So it won't be live like this is, but I plan to have a weekly release. And basically it is an interview that I'm sitting down with somebody and we're talking about their life. And so what I think makes the human experience so incredible is, and not my project, but just the actual human experience that we all live through, is that there can be things that are so similar, we can relate to each other so well, but you are never going through exactly what somebody else is going through. Right. And so everybody's perspective is different and everybody has their own story to tell. And so it's this thing where it's this platform for people to tell about their story, to mark their story in the history book or whatever it is, what have you. It's their chance to kind of express their perspective and where they're coming from and their truth. And it just, as this idea formed, and it's been probably a journey of 8 years or so that this has kind of been coming together in my head, and only the last couple of years that I've been actively working on it. But just this idea that empathy is such a huge part of what makes us human, and compassion is such a huge part of what makes us human. And so to be able to create a platform where people can, without shame and without reservation, get up and tell their story and who they are and what they've lived through, just seemed like such a awesome thing. And I have been so incredibly humbled by everybody that I've spoken to thus far. I have around 20 interviews done. And so I have just, it's not that many, but I've just been blown away by people's vulnerability and capacity.
Yes. So where did the idea originally come from for the human experience? What made you, or how did you come about it?
Yeah. So it was actually twofold. And like I said, this was a very long journey. So this is a simplified version. But the first thing was going through my own domestic violence experience. So I was young. I was in my early 20s when I got married. So I hadn't had much life experience at that point. But what I did have was so drastically changed after I walked through that time in my life. And it changed my perspective on so many things. It changed my perspective on the world and how I thought about it and how I thought about God and how I thought about other people. And so it was this very marked shift in my life that I kind of felt like, I feel like other people have this too. And maybe it's not one seismic shift, and maybe it's generational, or maybe it's multiple decisions that kind of just change the trajectory of your life. But when you live you, when you live, you experience life, right? And that sounds really redundant. But what I mean by that is you gain the knowledge to understand who you are and how you see the world. So that was the first thing that I thought, if I feel this way, there has to be other people that feel this way. And I feel like if we could just understand where each other was coming from, then maybe a little more compassion would be available. And especially in the last, it seems, 7, 8 years, 6, 7 years, compassion seems and empathy have seemed to be in short supply, and in a lot of circles. And so just the desire to bridge gaps in that way. And I firmly believe that hate does not exist. It really can't exist in proximity. Because once you know somebody as a human being, it's very difficult to actually have hatred for another person. Of course, there are always exceptions to the rule. There are always going to be people that are just not acting in good faith and not coming to the table trying to understand other people. But I think in a lot of cases, people just are afraid and they don't understand and they don't know what they don't know. And that's an oversimplification and it's not a justification. But I just think it's important to know that proximity matters, and when you can humanize somebody, everything changes.
Yes.
So that was kind of the first thing. The second piece of it was that my grandfather, who is very, very close to passed away in 2016. And he had an incredible story. He grew up in Hungary and, he spent 4 years in a communist prison in Hungary, and he was able to escape, and he came to the U.S. and he worked at the University of Penn as a physicist and worked on a project with NASA. And again, this is very overview stuff, but he just had this incredible life. And I knew him so well, and I knew him on a different level, obviously, because he was my grandfather. But I had this really big hole after he passed that was like, nobody's going to know what this man did or who he was or what impact he had unless I tell the story, because he can't tell it anymore, right? And so these kind of two ideas came together as, let's build a platform and let's allow people an opportunity to use their voice, because they don't need me to use my voice for them. Let's allow people the opportunity to use their voice and hopefully, put record to some of these incredible, incredible stories that people have in their lives and the amazing things people live through and overcome. And people are amazing, and they continue to surprise me.
That is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Carrie, do you have a question or a comment right now?
So what you said about humanizing people, I think that is so impactful and important. And I think that it can be world changing because, of course, humanizing people, oh yes, that sounds great. It spreads compassion and empathy. But literally, if you look at really horrific human events such as genocide, it starts with the dehumanization of a specific ethnic group or religious group, and, things of that nature. Like, that's literally the catalyst when you can change public perception from this is a human populace to this is an infestation, this is an other. That's how things like that start. And, unfortunately, we've seen things like that even within, our own country, coming from specific political rhetoric and stuff like that from both sides. And so I think you bringing human experience to the forefront and really working to make sure that people's stories are humanized. And I think that's so important because, like you said, when people can see that this is an actual person who, or these are actual people who are going through things, and even if the person can't specifically relate, they may be able to take a step back and be like, oh, maybe, I shouldn't judge so harshly. Because judgment is a very serious thing. People don't realize how it snowballs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that that's so awesome.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And you're right. I mean, we see a lot of it on the daily. It's not something in the past. It's not something that's gone away or something that we don't see often. And I just think I want to highlight how much that type of behavior is based and rooted in fear. And again, that's not a justification for bad behavior, but when you know the root cause, you can do something about it. And if the root cause is fear, then maybe all we need is understanding, right? Because it's not actually hatred. It's not actually vitriolic. It is just this misunderstanding of somebody other than them, right? Or something other than them. Some way of life other than theirs. And so you don't have to agree with them at the end of the day. You don't have to be land on the same side to treat somebody else with compassion and with empathy and as a human being.
Yes.
So it sounds like, as I'm listening to you, that the human experience is it's not just for the interviewee, the person that you're interviewing, but also it's just as much for the audience to get to hear a story and get to learn an experience, even as you just said, even if we don't agree with it, even if we don't understand it, but to be open to it, to have our worlds open just a bit more, to move towards understanding, which will, I believe if you are a mature human being, understanding will help you move toward compassion and empathy. So it sounds like the human experience is well-rounded for us all. Carrie, you were going to say something?
And I think subjective stories are such a good way to do that because when people have a certain outlook on life, or they have a certain reality, everyone has a certain reality, a certain outlook on life. But when sometimes you start spouting facts at people or like research, they feel like you're undoing things, like you're undoing very foundational beliefs. But when you put it and they start rejecting it, it's like, no, they shut down. But like when you put it in the form of a story, it's much more digestible and it's less jarring.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that stories are so intrinsically human. And so that's why we love them and why we respond to them so well. I mean, on any level, people love story. And so I think that this project has reinforced some things that I thought might be true, which is that people really want to be heard and people ultimately want to understand. And story is the bridge to those things.
So, Jen, as you are looking for stories or experiences, are there specific types of experiences that you're drawn to or looking for to share? I mean, do the experiences have to be touched with or born from some sort of trauma?
No. So I think it's really important to talk about this, actually, and I'm glad you asked because I am not perfect, and so I will say what I believe, but please know that I am sure I fail at this. I am very intentional about trying to not be exploitative with anybody's story.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a few things that I kind of walk through to determine whether I'm going to pursue a story. First of all, the most important one is, does this person want to tell their story? Mm-hmm. I'm not forcing anybody to do this.
Yes.
This is people that are extremely generous and vulnerable, but there is no force or coercion. It has to be their decision. And ultimately, I want the experience to be empowering, because I do believe that people want to be heard. And so to be given a platform to tell your story in your narrative is a really powerful tool. But you have to be given the freedom to do that and feel that you're not there to serve an agenda. And so with that, I think I'm open to any story. Anybody, I mean, I open this up to absolutely anybody. And so please, I mean, like, write in if you want to tell your story. I would love to interview you. But it has to be something that they want to do. Mm-hmm. The second thing is, and again, it's all kind of on the same line. It's very much interviewee led. So I don't come with questions. I kind of know, generally speaking, what they're going to talk about. But I tell everybody that I interview, listen, this is you. You are the leader here. I'm following you. Because I'm not an investigative reporter. I'm not trying to dig up your dirt. I'm not trying to catch you in some exaggeration or a lie or whatever. This is your story, the way that you want to tell it. And so whatever your lived experience is, that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear, the quote unquote objective reality or the other person's point of view in that where your story is concerned, because we're talking about you. So that actually really intimidates people, generally speaking, when we start, because they don't know, like, what am I going to talk about? But we get rolling and we just start having a conversation. And generally I find that people are really open and really vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And again, I feel like I'm a broken record here, but it just reinforced this idea that people want to be heard. And once somebody is sitting there actively listening, because listening is an active response, people want to tell their story. So yeah, if people are in a place that they are okay to talk about their trauma and it's something that they want to share, that's great. I would love to listen to that story. Mm-hmm. But that is not a requirement for somebody to tell their story. Everybody has something to talk about.
Yes. Well, I think that is absolutely true, and I'm glad that you pointed out your process, that you actually have a process when you determine who's going to be interviewed, and just like we do here, there are some people think, if you just want to be on a program, we just take you and throw you on air. It doesn't work like that. There there is a process, and so in addition to wanting to share your story, you also have to be healed enough to share your story, especially if we're talking about trauma. And I mean, just like you said, we never want to exploit anyone or their pain, what they went through. We're not trying to, just garner listeners that way. We just want to share information that will be helpful. So I think that's important to point out, when you speak with someone and you're sharing their story, this person is in a place where they're ready to do that and they're healed enough to do that. And I think it's a powerful thing when you're actually able to move through your experience, and when you're strong enough to share it. That is a beautiful thing. I think if you're in a place where maybe you're still working out some things and you're not as healed as you should be, and if you try to share that experience, I think you can do damage to yourself And I think unwittingly you can do damage to others, because you really have to be in a solid, healthy place before you put yourself in an atmosphere, to share that way. It's a big thing. It's not small. If you're on a radio program or a podcast, or you're doing a television interview, that's not a small thing at all. And everyone, it takes courage to do it.
Yeah.
And I think it takes courage to help someone. I think what you're doing is a beautiful thing when you're allowing people, you're helping them, giving them their voice, giving them the platform for them to share and get it out there. And as you said, people want to be heard. People really want to be able to sit down and tell their story. No interruptions. Don't cut me off. Don't change my words. Don't twist it around. Don't try to make my broken English pretty. People really just want to be heard. And it's, you'd be surprised what a 5-minute conversation could do for individuals.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, to your previous point, I have had a couple people turn me down, which again is totally okay. I say that from the beginning. There's no pressure to do this. And I've actually had somebody try to do it and not be able to. And that was also okay. Mm-hmm. The other thing I tell everybody is, we can get through this whole interview. I can go home and edit it, and I can send it to you, and you can listen to it and think, wow, I'm really not ready for this. And that's fine. I'll pull it. It will never see the light of day. Because in order for this to be an empowering experience, they have to be in control of everything all of the way through.
Yes.
And I really just want to see myself as a facilitator, right? I want to help make these stories available because I think they're so important. And I will tell you, it brings me no greater joy than sitting and listening to somebody's story that is being vulnerable and so open with their lived experience. It's an incredible, incredible opportunity. And I feel honored and humbled and all of the things. I feel so grateful to be in this position. But I think part of what makes this okay, and part of what makes this a project that I want to see lived out long term, is that there has to be boundaries on the project. Yeah. It cannot be about getting the story. If it's about getting the story, then we've lost the plot. And then I would just say the other thing that I try to do, which I'm starting out, and it's not always the easiest thing because I'm just going with who my community, but I'm trying to be really intentional about not just having one type of person being interviewed, one type of person in one type of community and one culture. My dream for this is global. I want people around the world. I want to interview people around the world. Part of that is I think it's so important and we have the access and the resources to bring stories from around the world into a central location, right? We have the technology to do that. The other part is selfish in that I want to travel the world. So it works for me because I would love to see the whole world. So.
Well, that's a good plan.
Yeah.
So when you are ready, when your project is ready, how can we listen to the human experience, and how can we contact you?
Yeah, so it is going to be on all podcast platforms. So Apple Podcast, Spotify. I'll be uploading it to YouTube, whatever your podcast app that you use is. But it'll be on YouTube as well. And then I will have it hosted on my site, so you can just play it from my website as well. So there will be a lot of different ways to access it. And if you follow me on Instagram at GetTheHX, GetTheHX, that's where I post all my updates. My website is also linked in my bio there.
Awesome. Luv Bay, we want to welcome you again to Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern with a replay on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern, and then also again on Thursdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern. And Luv Bay, please remember that we are rising out of the ashes together. I want to share a couple more resources, and then Carrie, I'll go to you for a question or a comment. We have the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, also known as RAIN. Their website is www.rainn.org. The National Sexual Violence Resource Center. Their website is www.nsvrc.org. The National Sexual Assault Hotline, their phone number is 1-800-656-4673. And the resources that were shared on tonight, these are all in the United States. But listeners, I want to remind you again, wherever you are, wherever you live, if you reach out for resources that are on a national level where you are, those national resources should be able to direct you to local resources closer to your home. So please, wherever you are, just do a Google search. Speak to your own doctors for more information. Go to a library. If you can't do a search on a computer in your own home, go to a library, a public library. Do whatever you can do and look for information where you are, where you live. Carrie, you have a question or a comment?
I think that that's really good, what you're talking about, making sure that the person who's speaking, if you're doing a trauma narrative especially, is in control of the whole process, because sometimes just talking about it can be triggering. And I think that's another thing that's really good about your show is that, like, I'm going back to the idea of placing judgment on people. I think especially now, still now, there's this huge stigma with not being together or something, having to be this pillar of strength, even for women. I really think that, and it's like, if you sometimes, well, I've even experienced this, and it's like if you get triggered in public, or if something triggers you, it's like, oh, you're a basket case, like you don't know how to cope, like all of these things. And it's like you said, human experience. A human experience is basically something that's so visceral and authentic to humanity. It's like, because we live in society, right? But a human experience is like the individual self going through something, like that humanity within you that's experiencing this thing in your life, not the individual in society, how you're supposed to respond, how you're supposed to react, going through this event. That's the human experience. And so I think that your show helps people be really honest about their feelings. And because a lot of times people are like, oh no, I didn't feel that way, this happened to me, but no, I never went through anything like that. No, I've never felt like that. Like, are you sure? But I think it allows people to be vulnerable in a way that's not vulnerable, listening to the other stories of people, which I think is really good, because there's too much, of course you need etiquette, and there's things that you don't do, but, there's too much, this is how you're supposed to react, this is what you're supposed to say, this is how you're supposed to feel. It's like, we live in this gaslighting society, and you could talk about, like, what gaslighting means, since, you're the guest and everything, so I don't want to, because that's a whole topic.
That is a whole topic.
I think everything we say is a whole topic.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think conversations help people be real.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that, I kind of said it before already, but I want to highlight it again. Listening is an action, and I think we don't talk about that enough, and we definitely don't do it enough. So this idea that you're listening to somebody and to hear them and not to wait for them to be done talking, and that's two different things, right? Listening to somebody to know where they're at and to try to understand them rather than waiting for your turn to speak. And so I think that it's something we've gotten really comfortable with doing. And I don't know that this may be a long suffering tradition, within humanity, because we have our stuff too, right? But I think that it's when you actually look at listening as an action and when you sit down to do it actively, it changes everything. It changes the way that you see people. It changes the way that you start to see yourself in other conversation. It's a practice and it's a conscious effort. And so to actually listen to somebody, it sounds simple, but it's not. But the concept is deceptively simple. It actually takes practice and a willingness to be present to listen to somebody.
Yes. And also being able to talk without knowing there's an anticipated response.
Right.
Like growing up for me, I know that if I was asked a question, even how do you feel about this? I knew there was a right answer. There is a right answer.
Yeah.
So being able to talk freely without there being, okay, cue the Jeopardy theme song, like, what's the right answer? What am I supposed to say? And you get so lost in what you're supposed to say that you don't even know your own voice eventually. You don't even know. It's hard to have your own thoughts. And, I had that so much, being, trapped in a world of anticipated response. It's really hard because, it starts messing up your ability to form opinions.
Yes. That's a really good point.
I love that.
Absolutely. Carrie, I think that's a great point that you made. First of all, listening does take work. Listening is something you have to be intentional about. If you listen, that's how you can actually have a conversation. I find it absolutely irritating to know that the person in front of me is only just waiting for me to finish saying whatever I'm saying because they want to say something. That I can't stand that. That bothers me to no end. And then to Carrie's point, I full well understand and know, and it comes from childhood, having that pre-prepared response to whatever question is asked of you. I know what I can say. I know what I can't say. I know what's expected of me. And you really do get lost. Because I know what I think, I know what I feel, but I can't say it. Because whomever is asking me this question doesn't really want to hear what I think and what I feel. You want me to say what makes you feel good. You want me to say what you agree with. And I can truly say from a child growing into an adult, that's something that stayed with me. And that is something that really made it hard to be able to speak what I wanted to speak, what was coming from me. I could always give you the answer that you wanted to hear. I could always give you the answer that was going to be quote unquote politically correct. But it was really hard to be able to share my own thought and my feeling and actually be okay with it if you didn't like it, if you didn't understand it. So much comes from listening the correct way. And again, I think that this is a wonderful thing that you're doing, just giving the opportunity for those to be heard. You cannot underestimate, as you said before, people want to be heard. People want their stories to be shared. Even if it's just a room, if it's just one or two of us sitting down, people really do want to be able to share their story in their own words and just have it out there. So I think what you're doing is a great thing.
And then also being such a great and comfortable interviewer, because even in not just in interviews, but in everyday conversations, it's like if you say your feelings or you give an opinion that the person doesn't want you to give, especially if the person's an authority figure or someone who has more power than you. Like sometimes they'll go in circles and circles, or it won't leave you alone because they're like, no, I'm not going to leave this alone, or I'm not going to stop going in circles until you say what I want you to say. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, oh my gosh.
Really.
So I love that being a good interviewer is so important, because that happens not just in interviews. I think interviews are kind of a reflection of the way real conversations happen. Even if the conversation or the interview is bad, like that's a reflection of how that would go down in real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
With those two people.
Yeah, you get out of it what you put into it, right? And it's such a they exist in such a vacuum, so everything is really heightened. But I think you're right. That's exactly what would happen if you took the microphones away and you called it a conversation. So, yeah. I really love that point, though, Carrie. I think it's so important because I think it's something that we can all also relate to. We all have those people in our lives, and I think we have them more often than not, because everybody wants to do whatever they can to be comfortable. And when you start talking or doing things that you don't know about or are unfamiliar to you, you start to lose your sense of comfort. And as human beings, I think we have the ability to stretch, but we don't always want to. It's not our first instinct. If we practice, it is something that we are absolutely capable of. But I think our fight or flight kind of goes up when we start to feel our comfort slipping.
Yeah.
Yes, that is so true. And I think we learn a lot of that in childhood. I was raised, you don't talk back to your parents. I believe in that. But I think that you should, of course, there has to be boundaries and stuff like that. Like there's the parent and the child. But I think that you should be able to have a conversation with, I'm not a mom yet. I feel like conversations are good.
Yes.
I didn't really have that option. It was just kind of like it was, it wasn't a conversation. It is.
Yeah, it is what it is.
It should be, Carrie, I completely agree. My youngest child is 9 years old, and I allow her to share her mind. I allow her to speak to me. I allow her to ask me questions. And of course, it's all in a respectful manner. But I allow her to have her voice, because I don't want her to be 18 still trying to figure out, how do I navigate in this world? I don't want her to be 22 or 35 or 46 still trying to figure out, how do I speak up for myself? How do I ask basic questions in a room full of people? Either they're like me or they're different from me. I want her to be able to interact with males and females, with older and younger, with different cultures and different atmospheres, formal, professional, or laid back, relaxed. I want her to be able to do that. And I think it starts with us allowing our children to have a voice and teaching them how to communicate respectfully. You can ask me a question, but you do so respectfully. Now, there are some cases where I said what I said, and this is the case. I am the parent, and it has to be this way. And you may not like it, and you may not understand it. But I can still communicate that to her in a way where she understands it has to be this way. But at the same time, I'm listening to her. Well, this is why she wanted it to be different. And I explain it to her. Some things, it can't be done. Some things have to be done this way. But I will listen to what you think. I will listen to what you feel. I'm not discounting that. Whereas when we were children, we were just completely shut down. You can't say anything at all. And I don't want her, personally, I don't want her to ever be in a situation where she is upset or she's hurting and something is wrong and she feels like she can't come and tell me. I don't want that to happen. So we have to create the safe space when the normal things are, happening. All right, when we're discussing dinner, this is what we're about to eat. If you don't like it, you can voice your opinion, but let's talk about that. But if I don't allow her to tell me, you know what, I don't want this broccoli right now, I just don't like it, or I don't like this new dish that you put in front of me. If I don't allow her to talk to me about simple things like that, there's no way that she would be comfortable coming to me about the difficult things that may happen. So I wholeheartedly agree, with you on that, Carrie. We have to give our children voices,
Exactly. I don't even think there's an issue with being a strict parent. Like, I really don't. I just think that a kid shouldn't be punished for having individuality,
Yeah.
Because I've seen in me, like, if you, I don't know, how can I describe it? Like, I guess if like, when I was growing up, if I was too different or something, like, not, like, even me talking back or anything like that, I guess I was, even just in the music I listened to or just my mannerisms or anything like that, if it was, like, too different from, I guess, what the status quo was, it was, like, a punishable thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just think that kids shouldn't be, of course you have to say, okay, this is wrong, this is right, or I think if you go out like this in public, you might be judged in a way that's very damaging by your peers. Of course, like, as a parent, you have to protect.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think, like, that kids should be okay to know it's okay to be an individual.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's totally correct. And I think that this applies in all walks of life, right? I mean, yes, it absolutely begins when we're children. And I think a lot of us experience that same thing and that same just desire to be heard and to be understood once again. And so it's like, just because they're children doesn't mean that they're not people, they don't have the same desires as the rest of us. And so I think it's just really important that we acknowledge and we know that it doesn't matter what age you are, what race, what gender, what orientation, what creed, anything like that. You don't have to agree with somebody to respect them.
Yes.
And to treat them with compassion and consideration and dignity. And I think that ultimately that should be the baseline, right? It's not what we have, but that should be the baseline. Everybody, every human being deserves to be treated with dignity and compassion. And that, I think, is where we kind of lose the plot with our differences. Mm-hmm. We kind of turn inwards and have this mentality of, well, this is my group and that's their group, and that's where us versus them comes in. And that's never going to get us anywhere. That's never going to be a fruitful way of thinking. All that does is separate. So I was really, along my whole journey, I was really inspired by Brian Stevenson, and he runs the Equal Justice Initiative, and he was the first person that I really heard talk about proximity from a justice perspective, and it's something that has just stuck with me for years after kind of reading his book, Just Mercy, and the idea that when you are in proximity with somebody, you cannot get lost in all the other stuff, because what is standing in front of you is a human being. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, you are human to human, and you are confronted with somebody that is just like you. And we have our differences, and we have different beliefs and different ways of life, and that's totally okay. That needs to be okay. But at the end of the day, you are looking at another human being, and as somebody that believes in God, I personally believe that all human beings are made in the image of God. And so when you confront another human, you are confronting the divine. And I think that is really where it boils down to for me. Being with other people, hearing other people's stories, it is an opportunity for the divine.
Yes.
And also, everyone starts out with dignity. Like, we are born entitled to dignity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, because there's this whole thing with, like, you have to, it's like dignity is something you have to earn, like, or something through money. And
right.
I don't know, I just think that is so, like, I don't even know the word, like erroneous, like really, really wrong.
Yeah, it's broken, absolutely broken.
Yes. So because this person, you know, they have Maserati or whatever, and their house is humongous, and they have 9 rooms in their house that they don't use, and everything like that, they have more dignity than somebody who, you know, lives in a 1-bed, 1-bath apartment and might live paycheck to paycheck. And nothing against one bedroom, because some of those are really nice. So I'm not like, ew, 1-bed, 1-bath. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about, I was just giving a stark comparison.
Yeah.
But, yes, I'm just like, I don't understand, because I feel like now people are equating like monetary possession with like the amount of dignity that you have.
Yeah.
Or like, you're more human because you have more money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I think the human experience will help us, I want to say, get in touch with reality. I guess that's a simple way to say it. Like, bring us back to ourselves.
I will say that this experience, going through the motions and doing the recordings for the podcast, has reinstated my faith in humanity in a way that I honestly did not think was possible. There has been so much turmoil and so much vitriol, and it kind of felt like, all right, this is where we're at. Like, we're never gonna get past this. And don't get me wrong, there's all of that is still out there, but I'm kind of being schooled by my own project. Like, going through these motions and actually meeting with these people has been just an intensely healing and humbling experience for me. And so in that way, I feel really honored, and I definitely struggle with some imposter syndrome, because I come to this point where I'm like, why are people so generous? And that is the word that I just keep coming back to. They're so generous with themselves, with their stories, with their time. In every interview I have, people are like thanking me for my time, and I'm like, no, thank you for your time. And it's this very circular, argument that we kind of get into, but it has just been such a healing and cathartic practice for me. And so no matter what happens, I'm just intensely grateful. I truly hope for the biggest and best things for this podcast, mostly because I think that everybody that sits down to tell their story deserves the biggest platform, because with all of the noise happening, this is just so raw and so real and so true. And I just find so much beauty and grace in this.
Well, that is awesome. And we're just under the hour, and in the few minutes that we have, and I don't want to spoil anything, but just in a few minutes that we have left, can you tell us some of the places you visited, maybe some of the topics you covered? Like, I don't want to give anything away, but can you tell us a little bit?
No, it's a good question. Because I think people truly think they don't have a story to tell until they start talking about it. And that's totally fine. But I guarantee you do have a story to tell. I have been, the furthest I've been so far is Kenya. I was fortunate to be there for something else and was able to set up some interviews while I was there. And I was able to interview 5 incredible women, and they're amazing. All of their stories were so different. And yeah, I just felt so honored. I couldn't believe I was sitting here actually capturing this. I felt like I was geeking out over it. Just like, I'm actually doing it. We're really doing this. So yeah, that's the furthest I've been is in Kenya, and I've gone to I was just in the Midwest this past month. I've been down to Florida, and then I've done a lot of local stuff as well. So I've done everything from I interviewed a woman who worked in a refugee camp in Kenya. I interviewed a woman locally who is struggling with long COVID, and it has really just changed her life. I've interviewed a social worker that is living in Pittsburgh in a gentrified area after coming from a upper middle class upbringing in white suburbia. Just kind of all over the place. I interviewed Tia, so I will say that Tia was actually my first interview for the podcast. So that was fabulous. She was amazing and so willing and so open. I've interviewed a couple of people that have had experience with domestic violence because, again, that's my community and that's who I have been around. And those are the people that have wanted to tell their stories. I have interviewed a few men, but it's mostly been women. And I don't know if I'm answering your question adequately. I feel like I'm kind of dancing around the subject. But
no, you have. You answered. I mean, I think it is beautiful.
But I want to say that truly everybody has a story, and if you want to tell it, I want to hear it.
Thank you.
One of the things that I do that I don't think I mentioned, one of the things that I do is that, again, proximity is a really important factor for me. So I do all of my interviews in person. So that's why I've been traveling with my equipment. I don't do it over Zoom. I will come to you. And if you want to meet in your home, that's great. If you want to meet at a coffee shop, or I can rent a room at the library, like whatever that looks like, because there is something so special shared when we are sitting face to face. And yeah, it's just been a really incredible experience. So I hope to kind of reach the world and visit people all over to hear and share their stories.
That is great. That is absolutely wonderful. So as we are just under the hour, I just want to say thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing the human experience and telling us what it's all about. We are really looking forward to when you begin, when it starts. We will definitely let the listeners know, and we will be listening along with you. Luv Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes from the program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence TV. We want to thank you for joining Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Luv Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Good evening.